I think Mike Riley becomes a very likely candidate to be bought out by the Boston Bruins.
Wearing the buyout bullseye.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it makes too much sense.
Bullseye.
When you only have $5 million in cap space like the Bruins do, you only have like 7 forwards signed. You have a surplus of defensemen, a plethora of guys that you're probably going to even have to trade somebody after you bought out Mike Riley as well. And you can get a lot of savings. I think it's a $2.3 million savings this first year in the buyout.
And the second year, as you pointed out in your article, is nearly irrelevant because of the cap increase that's anticipated when the COVID escrow part is over and that they can get back to business as usual.
And they have a lot of cap space anyway, too, on top of that. So I think the cap, I think, is a 1-year pain period that they're going to have to go through this coming year, where they're just going to have to get through it, try not to make too many moves that are long-term damaging for them, and figure out a way to power through, make some shrewd moves now, and then they can get to the other side. And as you mentioned, the cap will go up. They're going to have a lot more cap space as more contracts are coming off.
CLNS Media's Bruins coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.
So, Mike Riley, I think, is an extremely viable candidate for the buyout, and it makes all the sense in the world. They haven't used the buyout much, though, lately, especially. It's Jimmy Hayes and Dennis Seidenberg are the last couple that they've done. So it'll be interesting to see if they get full green lights from ownership to go out and put some dead money out there that the Jacobs aren't going to be getting anything in return from Mike Riley for a couple seasons while paying him money. But I think it makes sense on paper to do it.
If they bury him in Providence like they did this past season, are they better off with the cap for next season?
No.
If they just keep going like that?
No, they have dead money on the cap that's more than they would save with the buyout. In 2 years, I think it maybe, in 2 years he'd be gone, right? He's only got 1 year left. The 2-year thing is because of the buyout.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense if
you got to do everything based on this coming season.
I think it's $1 million extra, maybe somewhere in that range of extra.
That can make a huge difference on a personnel.
Well, it could be a player. It could be a very viable player, like at the bottom of your lineup, a fourth line guy.
Sure.
An extra forward, an extra D.
If a team ever needed to solve 3 roster problems internally, the time is now. Remember good old 1988 when Craig Janney and Bob Joyce, they come up from the U.S. and Canadian Olympic teams in time. It was like a great trade deadline pickup. Then it happened again in 91, 92 with Juneau coming from Canada, Hines and Donato from the U.S. And simultaneously Glenn Murray comes in from juniors. And it's like a whole different hockey team than the one that played that whole season. And it set them up for the decade, really. In this right now, in the immediate, there's people nibbling at the bottom 6. There's a few guys nibbling there, but is there really anybody there that under any normal circumstances would the Bruins ever consider taking a player like Mason Lowry and putting him in an NHL lineup rather than giving him a full AHL season? Historically, that's not how they do it. He plays in Providence this coming season, and then maybe at the end of the season, if he's knocking it out of the park, then you look at him that way. Right now, these internal solutions are, this is when that's supposed to happen. And boy, if there's a time for them to prove that their system is underrated, and it is rated poorly, then it's now.
Well, I do think we are going to see some of those players this coming year, and that's going to factor into, when we say there's only 7 forwards signed right now. I don't think we're including Oscar Steen, Mark McLaughlin, Jacob Lauko, who I think are all going to play a lot next year. At least definitely McLaughlin and Lauko. And I think Steen's on a one-way contract, so I would expect that he's going to at least get a look or, get some period of time as a bottom 6 guy to see if he can do it or not. But I think I do have a feeling that some of those guys are going to be in there, and it is going to be not nearly as deep a team as this past season. And they're just going to have to get by with some of those guys, at least until the trade deadline. And maybe they can, work some kind of salary cap magic at that point to free up some space to get somebody if they really need it. But I put it this way. They're not going to be winning 65 games, putting up 135 points this year, even if Krejci or Bergeron are back. I think they're still a playoff team, but I think because they have to have so many of these sort of like fringe players that have to establish themselves in the lineup and playing somewhat significant roles, if they're in there every night in a third or fourth line role, there's going to be pain associated with that, especially in Jakobs Borrell on the back end too. If it turns out that he has to, because they put Mason Lohrei in Providence, they have to play him most nights up here.
And you know what? Well, he was good before he blew that ACL. It's been tough getting back, but there was a couple games there where he was good, and then there's a couple where he's not. You say, okay, what's it going to be here? I think this is his fork in the road season. It's now or never for him as a Bruin going forward.
Yeah, no doubt. But that's, I think there is, unless they can work some serious trades, which, not having first round picks or second round picks for the next couple of years, not having a well thought of a prospect and development system at this point. I
think every night they pray that Matthew Poitras is Barry Peterson.
Of course, that somehow Fabian Lysell wakes up tomorrow and he's David Pastrnak too. Like, wouldn't that be great?
No kidding.
But like
Rick Middleton.
Yeah. I just don't, because of the assets, because of the all-in nature of last year, because of the salary cap situation, it's going to be tough sledding next year. There's no question about it. They're too good not to be a playoff team. I think they have too many good players and their goaltending is too good. And, I don't
know. That division's getting tougher.
It is. But like, if you start the season, let's say you start the season with let's say you don't trade any of the goalies. Okay. Let's say you start with Ullmark and Swayman as your 1-2. Let's say you have Lindholm and McAvoy as your top two defensemen. Let's say Bergeron comes back, Krejci doesn't. So you still have Bergeron, Marchand, Pastrnak. Maybe you have Taylor Hall, Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha,
DeBrusk.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like when you start,
and DeBrusk might be a lot better next season than he was at the end of this one, because let's face it, you break two bones winning the Winter Classic, and then he had never really quite the same player, even though he had some high moments in the second half of the season. It was difficult for him to sustain that. And he turned the corner so far in the first half of last season that I feel like we're going to see more of that player than the player we saw at the end of the year.
Yeah, no doubt.
CLNS Media's Bruins coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.